If you drive across the agricultural heartland of the modern world, you will see millions of acres of perfectly uniform, bright green corn stalks. The agrochemical matrix has conditioned you to look at those endless mechanized fields and see the pinnacle of human achievement. They want you to believe that this modern, genetically modified yellow dent corn is a miracle of science that is single-handedly feeding the planet. This is a complete commercial fabrication. The modern corn plant is not an independent organism. It is a highly fragile biological sponge designed to consume massive amounts of petroleum. In the early 20th century, the invention of the Haber-Bosch process allowed corporations to take natural gas, subject it to extreme heat and pressure, and extract synthetic nitrogen ammonia. The commercial agricultural industry then bred a new type of corn specifically designed to require this synthetic chemical to survive. Modern corn requires heavy, synthetic nitrogen fertilizers to grow, toxic herbicides to survive, and billions of gallons of industrial irrigation to produce its massive, watery, nutrient-dead yields. The multinational seed syndicates have systematically stripped the ancestral resilience out of this plant, replacing it with a patented, chemically dependent imposter that you must rent from them every single spring. But deep in the isolated, high-altitude mountains of southern Mexico, and quietly spreading through an underground network of rogue farmers, a massive biological rebellion is taking place. Agricultural dissidents are actively bypassing commercial seed catalogs and smuggling the text from the document known as Why Farmers Are Smuggling 3,000-Year-Old Corn Back into Modern Soil, PDF back into modern soil. These ancestral seeds completely shatter the laws of modern corporate agriculture. They do not need synthetic fertilizer, they do not need chemical pesticides, they are heavily armored, genetically explosive survival weapons. Today, we are entirely stripping away the fragile, petroleum-addicted retail farming model. We are breaking down the exact subterranean architecture, the biological nitrogen-fixing loopholes, and the ancient nutritional unlocking codes that make these smuggled seeds the ultimate threat to the modern grocery monopoly. The multi-billion-dollar commercial seed syndicates and synthetic fertilizer corporations rely entirely on your biological amnesia. They need you to forget these foundational, independent earth sciences so you remain perpetually trapped in their fragile, patented supply chain. If you want to pull these verifiable, hyper-resilient blueprints out of the shadows and deploy them on your own land, hit that subscribe button and join the Grounded Harvest Network right now before this video is suppressed by corporate algorithms. By subscribing, you are refusing to let centralized retail conglomerates gatekeep the biological tools required for true caloric independence. Secure your connection to our network now and let us dive directly into the biological anomaly that has the fertilizer industry terrified. The modern fertilizer industry exists because they convinced the world that corn is a massive nitrogen feeder that will permanently strip your soil of life without synthetic chemical intervention. The ancient, smuggled landraces from the Sierra Mije region of Oaxaca completely destroy this narrative. The atmospheric nitrogen lock. 78% of the Earth's atmosphere is made of raw nitrogen gas. However, this nitrogen is locked together by a remarkably strong triple chemical bond. Standard plants cannot break this bond, meaning they can starve to death while being completely surrounded by nitrogen gas. The aerial root mucilage. Instead of relying on soil depletion or synthetic chemicals, these specific ancient maize varieties deploy a highly advanced prehistoric survival mechanism. As the stalk grows toweringly tall, reaching up to 16 feet in height, it produces thick red aerial roots above the ground. These roots actively secrete a thick, transparent gel, a biological mucilage that drips down the sides of the plant. The anaerobic bacterial chamber. This gel is not sap, it is a highly engineered low-oxygen microenvironment. To break atmospheric nitrogen, a specific enzyme called nitrogenase is required. But there is a catch. The nitrogenase enzyme is instantly destroyed by oxygen. The plant's gel actively blocks out atmospheric oxygen, creating an anaerobic sanctuary for specialized, nitrogen-fixing bacteria called diazotrophs. Just like a legume, this ancient corn literally pulls free nitrogen directly out of the thin atmospheric air, allows the bacteria to break the triple bond inside the oxygen-free gel, and feeds the resulting liquid nitrogen directly into the stalk of the plant. It completely fertilizes itself. This biological loophole allows farmers to grow towering, massive, calorie-dense crops in heavily depleted, rocky, terrible soil, without spending a single dime on synthetic chemical inputs. The deep taproot anchor. While commercial corn relies on shallow roots and center pivot irrigation, these ancient landraces drive massive, aggressive taproots deep into the subsoil. They scavenge for ancient, trapped moisture, making them incredibly resistant to the severe droughts that regularly wipe out modern, hybridized commercial fields. Think about the sheer biological leverage of a plant that pulls its own fertilizer directly out of the sky. You are entirely bypassing the multi-billion-dollar synthetic chemical industry and locking your food supply into the raw, untouchable atmospheric physics of the Earth. This is how the matrix loses its power. When you realize that securing your harvest does not require an expensive corporate dependency, it requires a superior, unadulterated genetic code. If this realization shifts your perspective on backyard self-reliance, take 1 second right now to hit that subscribe button. When you join Grounded Harvest, you directly fund the preservation of these raw, non-industrial blueprints. Hit subscribe to stand against the manipulation, and let us transition into why these seeds must be kept strictly underground. You might ask why these incredible genetics are not sold at your local big box garden center. The answer is simple. You cannot patent the sky and you cannot monopolize a plant that fertilizes itself for free, but the threat goes much deeper than market suppression. It is a biological war of genetics. The anatomy of a corn silk. Corn reproduction is a highly vulnerable, wind-driven process. The tassel at the top of the stalk produces millions of grains of pollen. The ear of the corn, located lower on the stalk, pushes out hundreds of individual silks. Every single silk is a hollow, biological tube that attaches directly to one single unfertilized ovary on the cob. The introgression threat. The modern agricultural giants have heavily patented the DNA of their genetically modified corn. Because corn pollen is microscopic and highly volatile, commercial pollen can blow for miles across the landscape. If just one grain of patented genetically modified pollen lands on a single silk of an ancient landrace corn plant, it travels down the tube and physically alters the DNA of that specific kernel. This is known as genetic introgression. It contaminates the ancient, pure genetics with weak, patented, chemical-dependent DNA. Even worse, if a heritage farmer's crop is accidentally cross-pollinated by commercial corn pollen, the agrochemical companies can legally sue that independent farmer for patent infringement. The underground resistance. To protect these priceless 3,000-year-old genetics from both genetic pollution and corporate confiscation, an underground network of seed savers, indigenous advocates, and rogue homesteaders has formed. They do not sell these seeds in open catalogs. They hand-trade them in sealed jars. They grow them in isolated valleys and heavily buffered backyard plots. They are actively smuggling the biological heritage of humanity out of the crosshairs of the corporate monopoly, ensuring that a self-reliant, zero-cost carbohydrate source remains available for the people who are willing to plant it. We have officially crossed the midpoint of this breakdown, and the protocol is entirely clear. True agricultural sovereignty requires a conscious commitment to preserving the rugged, unpatented genetics of the ancient world. If you are ready to walk away from corporate retail dependency and stop letting agrochemical giants dictate what you are allowed to grow, hit that subscribe button right now. By subscribing to Grounded Harvest, you ensure that this relentless, non-industrial wisdom is passed down to the next generation of free thinkers. Tap that subscribe button to officially join our network today and let us decode the crucial failure matrix that destroys modern growers. If you acquire these smuggled seeds and plant them like standard commercial corn, you will completely fail. Ancient landraces are bound to absolute, unbending laws of nature. Here is the failure matrix you must navigate. Failure point 1, photoperiod sensitivity. Ancient landraces from southern Mexico and the equator are deeply governed by the sun. They are photoperiod sensitive, specifically adapted to short 12-hour days. If you take a pure Sierra Mije seed and plant it in the northern United States or Canada, where summer days stretch to 15 or 16 hours of sunlight, the plant will become deeply confused. It will grow 20 feet tall, consuming massive amounts of energy, but it will absolutely refuse to flower or produce a cob until the days get shorter in the late autumn. By the time it finally decides to reproduce, the northern winter frost will hit, and your entire crop will be instantly killed. You must select landraces that have been acclimatized to your specific latitude. Failure point 2, linear row wind failure. If you plant an ancient corn variety in a single long row like a commercial tractor farmer, you will end up with entirely blank cobs. Because the wind blows in shifting directions, the pollen from the top tassels will blow completely out of the row and scatter across your lawn. The silks will never be fertilized. Failure point 3, sterile soil syndrome. The mucilage on the aerial roots requires the natural presence of diazotrophic bacteria in the environment to function. If you have spent the last 5 years spraying your backyard with chemical weed killers like glyphosate, you have sterilized the microbial life of your soil. The gel will form, but the bacteria will not arrive, and the plant will starve. You must rebuild your soil biology before attempting to deploy an ancestral nitrogen fixer. If you successfully harvest a modern ear of yellow field corn and boil it, you are consuming little more than empty, watery starch and synthetic sugars. But the ancient landraces, the deep purples, the blood reds, and the flinty blacks are heavily armored vaults of dense, cellular medicine. But you cannot simply eat them off the cob, you must apply an ancient chemical key. The fatal malnutrition trap. Ancient maize is incredibly rich in vitamin B3, also known as niacin, which is a critical compound for human neurological and cellular survival. However, in raw, dried corn, this niacin is tightly bound to complex starches called hemicellulose, rendering it completely inaccessible to the human digestive tract. When early European colonists exported corn back to Europe, they ignored the indigenous chemistry. Entire populations tried to survive on raw corn flour, which rapidly triggered a horrific, fatal malnutrition disease known as pellagra, characterized by severe dermatitis, dementia, and death. The alkaline key and nixtamalization. 3,000 years ago, indigenous scientists discovered the biological loophole. They took their dried, rock-hard maize kernels and boiled them in water mixed with white wood ash from their cooking fires. The wood ash creates a highly alkaline solution with a high pH level. This specific chemical bath completely dissolves the tough outer hull of the kernel, breaks down the hemicellulose, unbinds the complex proteins, and instantly releases the trapped niacin into a highly bioavailable state. The ultimate survival dough. This biochemical process, known as nixtamalization, transforms indigestible hard flint corn into masa, which is a soft, heavily nutritious, life-sustaining dough. By combining the ancient genetics of the plant with the ancient chemistry of the wood fire, you produce a perfect, complete food source that can safely sustain a human family through the darkest, most brutal winters. If you have stayed with me this far, you belong to our high-retention inner circle. You are not surfing the internet for superficial entertainment. You are actively hunting for the unfiltered scientific realities required to break entirely free from the fragile, patented food system. You have successfully processed the advanced mechanics of atmospheric nitrogen fixing, photoperiod sensitivity, and the biochemistry of nixtamalization, and you have earned the final stage of this broadcast. Reward your dedication and support our work by hitting that subscribe button right now. We need disciplined, independent minds like yours anchored to our infrastructure to keep this raw earth science alive. Hit subscribe to lock in your spot within our tribe and let us look at the exact, step-by-step physical deployment you can build today. To safely deploy ancient landrace corn on your own property and protect it from commercial wind drift, you cannot plant a single long row, you must plant a tactical isolation block. Step 1. The grid formation. Always plant ancient corn in a dense, square block consisting of at least 4 rows by 4 rows. Because corn relies on wind to shake the pollen from the top tassels down to the silks below, a dense, multidirectional square guarantees absolute internal pollination rates regardless of which way the wind blows. Step 2. The buffer zone. If you live anywhere near commercial agriculture, you must plant a dense, towering border of sunflowers or tall amaranth entirely around the outside perimeter of your corn block. This creates a physical, biological wall that intercepts and catches stray commercial pollen before it can contaminate your ancestral silks. Step 3. The staggered timeline. If your neighbors are growing modern sweet corn in their backyard, deploy your landrace seeds exactly 1 month late. By aggressively shifting your planting calendar, your ancient corn will tassel and pollinate completely out of sync with the surrounding commercial crops, ensuring pure, unadulterated genetics. Step 4. The Three Sisters integration. Never plant your ancient corn into bare, dead dirt. Once the stalks reach 6 inches tall, plant a climbing pole bean at the base of every single stalk and heavily seed the ground around them with winter squash. The beans utilize the corn as a structural trellis, while their roots share underground mycorrhizal fungal networks. The massive squash leaves act as a living mulch, locking in all subterranean moisture and physically blocking weed seeds from germinating. Step 5. The generational harvest. When the autumn arrives and the husks completely dry down, you do not eat your entire harvest. You select the absolute largest, most flawless, deeply colored ears from the very center of your block where pollination was the purest. You dry them, strip the seeds, and place them in a glass jar in a dark, cool space. You have just successfully smuggled the next generation into the future. We have reached the absolute end of this disclosure, and the choice rests entirely with you. You can step away from this screen, return to the commercial loop, and continue purchasing fragile, chemically dependent starch from a corporate monopoly, or you can draw a definitive line in the sand today. Secure your permanent place in the Grounded Harvest Network by hitting that subscribe button right now before this video concludes. Do not risk losing your connection to these unadulterated blueprints of absolute independence. By subscribing in these final moments, you are casting a direct vote for physical autonomy, decentralized food production, and real biological literacy. Take definitive action, tap that subscribe button, and secure your position in our sovereign tribe right now. Reclaiming your status as a self-reliant producer starts the very moment you refuse to buy into the synthetic, patented illusion. You do not need to wait for the agricultural system to fix itself. You do not need thousands of acres, and you absolutely do not need a bag of synthetic nitrogen to secure your family's complex carbohydrates. You simply need to align yourself with the profound, unstoppable physics of the ancient world. Source a handful of glass gem, oak second green, or pure painted mountain corn from an underground seed saver. Dig your hands into the dirt, plant that dense isolation block, and watch as these 3,000-year-old genetics violently erupt from the soil. Let their roots shatter the hardpan. Let their mucilage pull nitrogen straight from the sky. Watch as they tower over your garden, perfectly adapted, completely indifferent to the commercial rules that govern modern agriculture. The centralized food syndicates spent the last century trying to convince us that human survival is a high-cost commodity that requires their massive chemical factories and their patented, fragile genetics. They wanted us to believe that without their constant intervention, the Earth is incapable of producing heavy calories, but their narrative is a complete biological failure. The fundamental laws of atmospheric scavenging, biological nixtamalization, and unhybridized vigor remain completely unalterable. And the $0 physics of localized, independent carbohydrate production are waiting to be deployed by anyone who has the courage to step off the corporate grid. You hold the absolute power to break the cycle of dependency right now, with your own two hands from the deep roots up. Welcome to Grounded Harvest. Your agricultural sovereignty begins today.